3:30, we start, sono le 3:30, iniziamo questa nuova sessione. Buongiorno a tutti, buon pomeriggio. Mi chiamo Patrizia Lombardi, sono il prorettore del Politecnico, molto orgogliosa in questo momento di ospitare un festival della tecnologia di questo tipo per i 160 anni dalla nascita del Politecnico di Torino. Scusate, ma devo switchare in inglese, visto che l'evento sarà in inglese. Abbiamo ospiti stranieri, speriamo di non perdervi. Quanti di voi sono italiani? Caspita, tutti. Ma l'inglese non è un problema, ovviamente. Beh, dico due parole allora in italiano sul senso di questo incontro. In particolare di questo evento che continua un po' ciò che Luca Mercalli ha presentato, e cioè parliamo di sfide per il futuro. L'Agenda 2030 delle Nazioni Unite presenta 17 sfide e anche la formazione, secondo noi, deve adeguarsi a queste sfide. Quindi oggi vogliamo discutere parlare del nuovo modello formativo per il terzo millennio, in particolare per le università tecniche e quindi in campo dell'alta formazione. Now I really switch in English and really welcome all of you to this session that is about a new formative model for sustainable development goal and challenge for the future. Yeah, today we want to discuss particularly how universities can respond responsibly to the challenge posed by sustainable development, and particularly to the Agenda 2030. And because of that, we are going to have a great speech by the Secretarial General of the Network of the European Technical Universities, CESAER, David Bohmer, that is here in front of me, and that will provide a keynote in the field, and then a number of panelists will discuss the issues, particularly because for the Politecnico di Torino as well is an opportunity to launch a new PhD courses. But we will discuss this later. Now I invite David to present a keynote on the field, and particularly highlighted the new challenge that technical universities has in the third millennium. Thank you very much.
Grazie a te. Buon pomeriggio, Politecnico di Torino. Ed è un gran piacere essere con voi qui oggi. Sono cresciuto a Zurigo ed è sempre un fantastico tornare nella vostra meravigliosa città. Mi congratulo vivamente con il Politecnico del primo Festival della Tecnologia. Vice Rector Patricia Lombardi, dear colleagues, dear friends, dear guests, I extend my congratulations to Politecnico and the Joint Research Center of the European Commission for the launch of this transversal PhD program to include sustainability, ecological, economic, and social sustainability into your PhD curriculum, a very important step. I'm here to inspire you in this respect, to trigger you, to turn your minds, open your minds as engineers, as scientists, towards a brighter and a new future. Universities of Science and Technology united in CESAER learn from each other in our network, inspire each other, and advocate in Brussels. We unite 53 universities of science and technology from 26 countries. This is both universities in the comprehensive sense with a strong S&T profile like KU Leuven, but also specialized universities of science and technology like Politecnico di Torino. Ladies and gentlemen, universities of science and technology have brought the sciences into the private homes. They have given birth to engineering in the 17th, 18th century. They have served the military. Universities like Politecnico, Torino have boosted industrialization. They have developed regions and cities. They have conquered the league tables, most recently in Asia, here in Hong Kong. Ladies and gentlemen, universities of science and technologies present the researchers, the knowledge, and the technology that are needed or were needed to fight superstition, to exploit the treasures of the earth, reshape our planet and the way it looks, conquer nature, colonize our worlds, free people after wars, determine the wars, build countries after the wars, land on the moon, and more recently we have been very busy with optimizing combustion engines. Ladies and gentlemen, we have created an understanding of the role of the universities in societies whereby research and education are linked in the Humboldtian sense. We added innovation as the beginning of the 20th century, particularly in the United States. By now it has arrived in all our universities. The so-called knowledge triangle. We placed in our understanding the working of universities in the so-called triple helix between industry and business, state and the academia, and more recently we have acknowledged that citizens are there. This understanding we have created was boosted up with new public management, making universities business-like organizations with performance-related management structures. We have added a globalization competitiveness paradigm on top of it. And in the end, all what we were supposed to do as of the mid-90s was to boost competitiveness in Europe, create jobs, and boost economic growth. This understanding, dear students, dear researchers, has come under threat from three sides. First, our biggest friends, the neoliberalism, actually state that we suffer from an innovation deficit. The knowledge we create, the technology we create, is not turned into services and products. The skills we deliver are not the ones needed on the labor market. And these friends of us have a whole list of what we are supposed to do. New ways of teaching, new ways of tearing down disciplinary walls. It's called the modernization agenda of universities. And all of us are busy complying because the money from the ministers and the European Commission, they all expect us to comply. That's the first criticism at the way we have been working. The second comes from nationalism. And it takes different forms. It takes forms from we shall close down certain universities or close down gender studies because we don't like the way the traditional values are taught at our institutions. But it also takes forms like own taxes in own nationals. We don't want to fund with our tax money international students anymore. More generally, there is a threat to academic freedom. There's a threat to institutional autonomy. And in a European sense, there is a threat to the free circulation of researchers, knowledge, and the technology, the so-called fifth freedom of the European Union. The second attack. The third challenge is a new one, and that's usually you, the Generation Z. The idea behind it is, it's already from the 70s, of course, but the idea is that the creation of public awareness and political change is needed in order to tackle the grand challenges of our times. Universities are expected to not only create this public awareness, but to put the world back on track in terms of a sustainable development. We speak of a new social contract in the sense of Rousseau that is needed to do that. I think if we reflect on these three forces that go on you as universities, that go on you as researchers, as new PhD students, the evidence is crushing. The gentleman in front of me was justifying what happens in terms of climate change. It's topped us by the loss of biodiversity, microplastic pollution, There is a catastrophic warning from science. All the indicators, as you have heard in the session before, ring the alarm bells. These tendencies are even strengthened or made even stronger by the fact that the wealth is shared more and more unequal on the world. 1% of the world population by now owns 50% of its resources. And the tendency is, as you can see, continuing. In scientific terms, we come to the conclusion that we are confronted with domino effects between these different challenges, tipping points, and the highest cited article last year in Nature foresees a hothouse, the planet Earth as a hothouse. All of this is crushing. Evidence, maybe you saw it last week, 11,000 scientists have warned from untold human suffering due to the climate change emergency. That is the background, the challenge that you see with these three forces, and I think the scientific evidence is quite clear which of these three is of the highest priority. Science and technology in the 21st century, meanwhile, creates all kinds of new technologies and scientific areas which are confronted with series of societal impacts. These create value pluralism, often in terms of conflicts and dilemmas in terms of their establishment. We also speak of a so-called moral overload. Think, for example, how to assure security and privacy in the application of new digital technologies. The question that was risen earlier is whether the combination of the Homo sapiens and the artificial intelligence and biotechnology will result in a new species, the Homo Deus, with an expected life expectation of 1,500 years. I don't think so, and I'm not suggesting that this is the discussion here today. The discussion here today is that we have achieved on planet Earth for the first time a single most powerful narrative for us all, a framework for sustainability that we all have to cherish and have to embrace. The United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, 17 goals with 169 corresponding concrete targets that we have to achieve by 2030. I call upon you as the new generation of researchers to embrace this agenda and to contribute to realizing it, because if you look at the facts, no human society, no single country at this world is living within the planetary boundaries. A systematic change is needed to achieve this. Europe, meanwhile, is doing its best. First, we are on track. Second, we have a new commission, and the President-elect, Ursula von der Leyen, as her first priority, has declared a new Green Deal. Europe should become the first continent, climate-neutral continent by 2050, whereby competitiveness and sustainability go hand in hand. That is the challenge that we together have to realize in the next coming decades. And she is flanked by that by Maria Gabriel, the Commissioner Designate for Innovation and Youth, which also combines the portfolios of research and education. In order to make this happen, the European Commission will launch on the 1st January 2021 an ambitious program called Horizon Europe, which brings you ample funding opportunities for you as coming researchers, particularly when it comes to the global challenges in Pillar 2, where we tackle these challenges together with the rest of the world. It is the most open research program in the entire world, and we will seek cooperation with the entire world and make sure Europe has a leading role in it. How are we doing that? Well, students, researchers, Politecnico, you must help us to save humanity and planet Earth. And how could you do that? I give you some inspiration. First of all, I think this model that we have of the competitiveness paradigm that we are handling, we have to enrich it. maybe even in terms of a Kuhnian shift, the first important thing is to note that we have moved out of a world that is created by gods. We have moved out of a world where nature was creating the world. We are in a time where humans create the world. Second, we have to release unprecedented great transformation. We know, and I've demonstrated, how universities of science and technology have changed the world, have changed the planet. We can change these challenges, we can tackle these challenges and change it to the better. The third big change is we have to leave the idea that we're only working for profits for industries and businesses. We have to think about values, we have to think about ethics, we have to think about social cohesion. And last but not least, we have to enlarge the number of people with whom we work. We should not exclusively work with business and industry, but we should work with arts, work with religion, work with not-for-profit organizations. It is about the release of unprecedented transformative power in terms of contribution to economic, ecological, and social sustainability. Sustainability, in this sense, combines economic growth, social progress, and environmental protection, addressing the biosphere, the society, and the economy. Sustainable development in these definitions is both an ideal location, whereby a balance is achieved between the use of the needs of the humans and what is around us, as well as a process of change. Science and technology, in order to have a true contribution, need to be free and autonomous to have a contribution. They need to demonstrate differences to politics, business, and industries, taking the considerations of the larger societies into account. We need to shift in our focus from growth and profit to values and ethics, and we must develop visions and projections for humankind in terms of a sustainable humankind and planet Earth. In essence, for you as engineers, as technologists, we must go back and combine Naturwissenschaft und Geisteswissenschaft, social sciences and humanities, and science, technology, engineering, and math. And how do we do that? How do we move from STEM to STEAM? For example, in terms of including the arts, in terms of design and the ethics of technology, including the behavioral sciences in terms of human-machine interaction, law, as in the legal application, the legal context of the technology that we develop, as well as the economical side in terms of circular economy. Science can contribute in various ways. It contributes, for example, through policy planning and monitoring and evaluation. Geo-observation is a well-known phenomenon there. Science contributes in the sense that, for example, environmental sciences contribute directly. But it also contributes indirectly, and an interesting science field here is mathematics and computer science, which is needed for simulation and modeling. But it also provides the key technologies for the 21st century, the game-changing technologies like artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and quantum technology. In the end, science will also have to contribute to an increased understanding and a greater interaction between technology and sustainability and the systems around us. When we look at education, education will have to increase the understanding and the knowledge about these challenges and the sustainable development, not only with the students and the staff, but also with the citizens around. It will have to provide the ability to communicate them effectively in society and to convince. It will have to deliver the talent that contributes directly as the environmental scientists, but it will also have to bring the transversal skills needed. For example, how do I apply sustainability in my engineering, in my electrical engineering field? Something we'll be talking about later on. Innovation in this sense and the understanding that we have of innovation will change in a certain way or will have to shift with us from an incremental optimization of combustion engines to disruptive, from an entrepreneurship approach to more creativity, from an exclusive focus on cooperation with business and industry to a multi-stakeholder model, including the arts, religion, and not-for-profit organizations. From protection and exploitation of knowledge and technology to the dissemination and to openness for the good of all. An interesting way of doing this is so-called research-based education through vertically integrated projects. It's a work done at Georgia Tech, whereby the focus is on cutting-edge research and development challenges project. Anyone in the university can participate, bachelor, master, PhD, top scientists, multi-annual vertical integration and multidisciplinary. Very much concrete, real-life problems taken to bring real-life solutions. To finalize, what you're doing, of course, is not in isolation. Around universities and around researchers, there's a whole ecosystem of societal and legal contexts. And with this narrative, this framework given by the United Nations is seconded or enriched with international treaties, constitutions, environmental regulations, metrics, rankings of universities, but also, of course, common values and norms that are taken by citizens, by students, by teachers, as well as the behavior of your governments and your businesses. What is the role of the university in all of this? Obviously, the university is an employer. Obviously, the university is a provider of talent, knowledge, and technology. It is also an operator of a campus. But what I'm trying to get here at is that there is an additional role. There is a role as an autonomous player in society. It is up to all of us to raise awareness of citizens, to initiate and to mobilize concrete action, and to enforce systematic change in society. Universities should embed economic, ecological, and social sustainability in all aspects of their governance, operations, learning, teaching, and in the community. They should create an environment that cultivates resilient, empowered, caring, and engaged students, staff, and faculty who will contribute to the health of people and the places worldwide. They should engage with arts, industry, government, religion, not-for-profit organizations, and civil society at large to disseminate their knowledge and nurture the talent that's needed to the benefit of the communities which they serve. They have to deepen and broaden their collaboration with other higher education institutions in networks such as the Italian Networks for Sustainability, or CESAER, or the International Sustainable Campus Network, to accelerate the collective action that we are taking and to move the public debate in this respect. They have to ensure that their networks are inspiring the researchers, the students, but also the societies that we serve. When you look at the operations of universities, there are several aspects in which they can work. For example, as an employer, it's one of the Sustainable Development Goals, but also when it comes to equality, diversity, and inclusion, when it comes to energy, both in terms of the consumption as the production of energy on campus, in terms of the construction, the buildings, the materials a university is having, the mobility and the transport. How many students come with a bike? How many take the car? How many air flights is the staff doing? Are they flying directly? Are they flying indirectly? Do they fly business class? Food, waste, chemicals, water. But it's also about communication, and I think this event here with communicating what Politecnico does, reaching out to the society, telling what Politecnico is doing in terms of rejuvenating this region and this city. But the university is also an organization that does lots of purchasement and procurement where it can act green. I finalize with some recommendations to you all to summarize my speech. First, I think it's utterly important to embrace the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. You have to help us to realize this European Green Deal. You should adopt this Anthropocene Weltanschauung and understand that it is us who has replaced the gods creating worlds. Release this unprecedented transformative power that science and technology have done before you with your research. Prioritize values and ethics above profits of companies. Cooperate in a multiplayer context. Rejuvenate your city and your region together with your colleagues in a post-industrial context. Help build socially and globally progressive institutions like Politecnico di Torino. And co-create a vision, a strategy, policies, structure, cultures that explicitly articulate the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals in the entire Politecnico di Torino. And for you as researchers, seize these funding opportunities that are presented to you at the European level. Politecnico has an excellent grants office that will help you to get these grants from Brussels. Incentivize students and colleagues to embrace the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as a means of raising the quality of teaching, of education, of research and innovation in terms of reflecting the sustainable dimension. Learn and share your knowledge with others. Demonstrate strong leadership and commitment. Be aware that from a scientific point of view, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals are a political construct. And for you as scientists, the challenge will be to directly link your work to what they do. And there are some legitimate concerns in terms of, for example, it's a lot of rhetoric versus practice, or it may become a tick box exercise, or there's a limited scope compared to what you do in your work. But that's not the point. It is the single most important narrative that we share. And it is up to us, all of us, to think beyond 2030, to broaden the scope of these concepts towards economic, social, and ecological sustainability. I think in the end, what I'm calling upon you is your societal responsibility as researchers, as young researchers. It is the Oppenheimer effect. When you read the autobiography from Oppenheimer after he created the nuclear bomb, he had considerations about his work. We all are citizens. We all have responsibilities as citizens. And I think that is at the very heart of broadening your scope as engineers. Thank you very much.
So good afternoon to everybody. Welcome again also from my side. I'm Ettore Bompard. I'm a professor of electrical engineering in this university. We are pretty much interested in the idea, of course, of energy transition. That is one of the, let's say, open issue in terms of sustainability in the energy sector. Energy is important, but is managed in a way that is pretty polluting in these days. So we are a little bit trying to understand the transition from what to what, from fossil fuels actually to something else, maybe renewables with new paradigm for exploiting energy. And in this respect, we have a bunch of cooperation with also the colleagues here with us today. So first, it's my pleasure to introduce to you the panelists that will discuss and make comments and provide comments to this very nice presentation that David provided to us. Let me start first. She already introduced herself from Professor Patrizia Lombardi. This is the pro-rector of our university, but okay, we can say that here he has two hats. One is the pro-rector, so one of the highest institutional authority of our university, but she also a researcher in the field of sustainability, and she's managing RUSI, that is in Italian the Rete dell'Università per lo Sviluppo Sostenibile. So it's the network of the Italian university that are trying to targeting exactly what we are discussing today. How to match a general need for sustainability from society that has many different dimensions and that can be summarized with the SDGs that have already been introduced, with training programs and activity inside the university. And so, welcome Patrizia, it's a pleasure to have you here also as an expert. Then let me introduce Dr. Serenella Sara. She's from the Directorate for Sustainable Resources of the Joint Research Center of the European Commission in ISPRA. She is basically working a lot in the area of life cycle assessment, green chemistry, ecology, and environmental science. One of the current projects she's working on is related to the assessment of the environmental impact of different areas of European Union consumption with respect to food, mobility, housing, and household goods. And it's very important because thanks a lot Serenella to be here today with us, because what we are discussing here is a cooperation between the Joint Research Center of the European Commission and Politecnico Torino in terms of establishing a joint program at PhD level to tackle exactly this issue of introducing somehow sustainability in the higher level education. Then let me introduce Professor Eugenio Brusa. She's the director of our doctoral school, so is one of our main actors in terms of high-level education, and is the coordinator of all the PhD programs at the Politecnico of Torino, and helped a lot in designing this joint activity. David, if you want to join us, okay. Thanks for this. So maybe my role here is just to help in pushing forward this discussion and to provide maybe some comments to the main points that have been listed by David very clearly in his presentation. I would ask to Serenella maybe first to provide some comments and to explain also the perspective from the point of view of the European Commission and from JRC, that basically is the in-house scientific service of the Commission, so is in charge also to provide ideas, directions to the policy DGs in terms of what to do in this wide area of sustainability. Thanks,
okay. Thanks a lot. I'm very happy to be here with you today, and I congratulate David for his presentation. It was very, very inspiring. I'm working at the European Commission. I'm a scientist, so I'm not writing directly policies, but I'm more on the research that is needed towards policy development. So we are close by. One of the bigger centers of the Commission outside Brussels is actually in Italy, on the Maggiore Lake in Ispra. And we were involved over time on sustainability assessment. Actually, the European Commission is acting on sustainability assessment of policies and on interventions since the early 2000s. And even before, there were several policies that were tackling sustainability. But more and more, the way in which sustainability has been seen by the policy has demonstrated that is not enough. Are so big the transformation that we have ahead of us that we need really to rethink the way in which policies are developed. So when we start a discussion over a collaboration that was already existing between the Joint Research Center and the Politecnico of Torino, we were discussing on the fact that we were asked by different directorate generals of the Commission to reflect upon how to better integrate sustainable development goals into European policies. And during this reflection, it was very clear that an important role is in the research area, but another important area of development is enabling people to understand more. That the fact that SDG are not just for few environmental scientists, very, let's say, expert of sustainability issue, but it's something like SDG and me, every one of us, being an engineer, being a doctor, being an architect, being a chemist, whatever, everything that we do has an implication. We are in a system fully interconnected, not only via the web, but interconnected in terms of actions and reactions and feedback. And this is something that also the policies are understanding more. The tradition of policies, it's a very sectorial tradition. We have very strong agricultural policies. We have certain industrial policies, and so on and so forth. And if you think about recent policies coming from the Commission, this systemic thinking is moving ahead. For example, with the circular economy that maybe you heard about, actually there you tackle something that is provision of raw materials, that could be the trade agreements of the Commission, but also the mining sector, if you wish. The production, so the way we produce products, that of course can enable this product to be much recyclable or less recyclable. But then the citizen, the consumer, when I have a product in my hands that is potentially recyclable, to be responsible in doing the separate collection or in delivering this product in a certain way. And then there is an old system of waste management that should deliver as well in a certain way. So this is just for giving you an example. And with these joint, let's say, initiatives for the doctorate, the idea was really from European Commission and especially from the Joint Research Center to share the challenge. We every day we are facing every day as researcher internal to the Commission to some of the questions that David was very clearly exposing to you. And there, we cannot just reply saying, okay, there is this paper there that is saying that we can solve that in the way ABC. We have really to move from just pointing the finger, as environmental scientists did over time, saying, oh, that is the problem. We have had climate change. We may have particular matter-related pollution. We may have marine litter, to something that is a solution-oriented approach to sustainability. And who better than an engineer or an urban planner or someone that is every day facing with defining solution may also consider that the framework for defining this solution has a sustainability fundamentals in sustainability. So from my side, the main message is on the side of the policies, I think there is an increased awareness on that, but it's very important that new generation of researchers, but also of professionals, are very aware of the boundary conditions that are determined by the Sustainable Development Goals.
Thank you very much, Serenella. We could listen to a supranational perspective like the one of the European Commission, and I think we are glad to know that there is this awareness and this willingness to cooperate worldwide and especially in Europe to face those challenges. I will leave the floor to Eugenio Brusa that can provide the perspective from Politecnico and from a scientist with respect to this idea to face together the challenges for sustainability at the university level and in the higher education.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody. Actually, this is a very interesting topic, but also is a real challenge to do something which is effective in this direction. I think that the real challenge for us as a technical university is effectively linking three things, or three keywords if you want: the needs, the systems, and the tools. In the discussion we just had, needs appears several times. As engineers as we are or you will be, and architects as we are or will be, we have to face the problem of satisfying some needs, and understanding at the beginning of our activity the needs is essential, because without this clear understanding we cannot proceed effectively. So from this point of view, having this high-level priority in the sustainable goals and development goals is the clear roadmap to proceed and to have a clear design, for instance, of systems, or even to apply the right approaches, like the system engineering. And this brings immediately to the word systems. In this case, we have to open our mind to understand that products or things or even environments we are dealing with in our activity, there are systems. So it means by definition that there are a lot of interactions in the several parts, in several subsystems, or between systems. So from this point of view, if we realize these, we can design suitably what we have to produce, what we have to manage, what we have to monitor or maintain, and so on. So from this point of view, systems is the object of our activity. And also the system thinking is a very interesting and a very effective approach, because we have to take care of all the issues related, particularly coming from the interactions. But I'm thinking about systems also in terms of network, in terms of cooperation between professionals, between scientists, or between men and women. And if you want, also between universities. So in our case, we're particularly appreciating that there is a strong contribution of the network CESAER in this activity. We have a strong contribution by the JRC in the project I will explain just in a minute. But we have also other cases in which we are trying to develop this kind of networking. For instance, we are just coming back from a kickoff meeting of another very interesting project, which is the Define United. Means that we try to have a supranational European school of doctorate, but not only of doctorate, generally speaking, of university education path, in which several universities try to have a common agreement to perform a sort of a common environment in which students, in which professors, researchers can have an effective interaction to create the system, the ecosystem, to perform this kind of education and to reach the need of sustainability. But from the point of view of the tools, we are implementing these kind of things by designing a new approach also for the doctoral education. Actually, we find that is very important, the profile of the doctoral school, and in particular of the PhD candidate, because if it is true that at the bachelor level you can get the basic rules, the master level you can get the approaches for the design, for the developing different kind of job profiles and professional profiles. At the level of the doctorate, you have the real possibility to think about the system, to get the holistic approach to face all the problems related to the research and the development we have to perform in your activity. That's why, in this particular case, we design a specific path in which we put 4 courses, basically. And these courses are partially given directly by our colleagues coming from JRC, because they are experts in these directions, so they can give a very effective contribution. But partially, they are also taught by our colleagues inside the Politecnico di Torino. And they deal with different issues of this discussion, because there is a first course in which we have an introduction to the Sustainable Development Goal, and in this case you can understand better the real contents of each one of the 17 goals. In the second one, we can see, for instance, the interaction between energy, economy at a European level, so we can face one of the main issue of the development goals to understand in particular which are the trends, which are the problems, the needs, and also the tools we can apply to solve these problems and to reach this kind of goal. We have a third one in which we define completely what is defined the life cycle assessment. That means understanding when you are designing a new product, you are thinking about a new system, the real life which will be performed by this system, to understand since the beginning all the functions, all the requirements, the needs which are mapped on the life of this system, until also the last step, which is the retirement eventually, and also the reuse of the materials to avoid waste and something like that. And there is a specific course, which is the third one, which is focusing on a specific goal to understand in a specific direction, in a specific case, which are the main tools which can be applied and implemented. And in this case, the goal which was selected is the climate change, exactly as Dr. McCulley previously told us and told you. So from this point of view, we try to interpret this challenging time for implementing the SDGs as effective as we can, in particular starting from the doctoral school, which obviously reflects the activity or the research which is performed within the departments of our universities, not only the Politecnico Torino, but generally speaking in this town, but in particular in our university. And from this point of view, to create the good link between research, innovation, and education, which is one of the best goals we can attend and we can reach in the next future.
Thank you very much, Professor Brusa. So at this point, maybe I can give the floor to Professor Lombardi, to Patrizia Lombardi, to comment and maybe provide a wider perspective from the educational point of view, seen also from the national perspective in terms of education to sustainability in the Italian university system.
Thank you very much. Thank you, David, for the inspiring presentation and to focusing on the social role of universities, which I think is summarizing. This is the key aspect, how university has changed since millennium ago when it started, and how is important now to recognize that together with the education and research, the so-called third mission is expanded, not only with the technical transfer, but also including public engagement and the civil society and the environment. So really the three models that you presented are now five different helices, which include civil society and environment. So we have the government, university working together with the industry, and technical university really focus on this, but we recognize that the civil society and the environment are part of our commitment, are part of our business. So this is a great change and a great challenge for university that require a rethinking of their way of doing things. I think this change is really part of the strategic thinking of this Polytechnic of Turin. And I'm very proud in this respect to be able to include the issues of Agenda 2030 in the different missions as macro objective for the universities. Since 2015, inside the Politecnico Turin, we are working with the Green Office for moving toward this awareness in the field of energy, sustainable mobility, in the field of circular economy, in the field also of urban outreach and education. And I want to come back to this education perspective, considering also my role of coordinator of the network of University for Sustainable Development. Is a network, national network, which involves 70 universities in Italy that are committed to transform university, considering the social role of that David mentioned. The fact that in education at Politecnico we are keen very much focusing on reorganizing things at all levels. Now we are talking about this initiative at PhD level, which is in perspective possible can be enriched, of course, with other courses that provide different subject, SSH as well, some social and humanities aspect together with a more scientific one. And can also be enriched in other perspectives. But what I want to stress here is that also at the bachelor level and at the master level, the education paradigm has been revised. For instance, at the bachelor level, we are working in a particular transversal approach that is about talent and impact, which involved 2,040 different students, mainly engineering side, 200 students from the engineering side, and 40 from the architecture, planning, and design, that are focusing in fields that are relating to sustainable development. But also the approach is different because it's very problem-solving and challenge-based. At the master level, the challenge are part of our educational model. So it's really important to stress that the different approaches are ongoing. At the national level, is very all universities are preparing for this change with new courses that focus that are focusing on environmental issues, but also in the approaches as well. I would like to ask you which kind of level you are. Are you PhD or also different? How many PhD here, student we have?
2.
Wow. How many master preparing for PhD? And how many bachelor? A few. Okay, thank you very much. It's very important to know because you have here a representation of the different aspects, and I'm sure that there are opportunity for exploring these different aspects. So I don't want to, maybe we have a different second round, but to stress the importance of starting from the education and also using the collaboration we have with stakeholders and territorial stakeholders, local authorities, and also the schools for making the exchange of the information. It's not only relating to dissemination and awareness, but also in relation to education. That is important to stress this collaboration among entities in order to progress in this field. So thank you very much. Maybe we can ask also from them directly.
Yes.
Unless David,
you want to add a comment?
No, you know, I come along many institutions in Europe, and I really would like to congratulate you with your work, Patrizia, that you, Guido, and the people at Politecnico are doing. To a certain degree, I think it's also linked to the specific context of the city. A city that had to reinvent itself after the Fiat factories were not as important anymore. So the university had to reinvent itself, the city had to reinvent itself. And the work you're doing with the Joint Research Center is extremely important, and I think it's a very important work also when you compare it to other members of mine, and you're leading the way in this sense, and I wish you all the best, and we are committed to go that way with you. What I think I would like to flag here is also, and it has been previous speakers have mentioned, the way we have to change our way. One of the things that trigger me with scientists, do a guess, when were the first scientific articles published about CO2 emissions and the effects it will have in the climate? Do a guess. Anyone? I found articles about CO2 emissions at the beginning of the 20th century, linking industrialization, CO2 emissions to something like warming. Another example, so how long has it taken until politics has picked this up? Another example, the first publications that said we have to stop thinking that industrial products and resources will be, the most important thing for the well-being of humankind, and that it will shift to knowledge. Yeah, science, knowledge, technology will be the future. First articles at the beginning of the 20th century. It took the European Commission until 1997 to recognize that knowledge is the key ingredient for welfare. So the point I'm trying to make is scientists like you, for decades, for 100 years, know what's going to happen. And one of those challenges this panel is been addressing here is, how can you reduce that time? How can you effectively communicate, speak out to politicians, to businesses, to arts, to football, so to speak, to make sure that you are not going to need 100 years before we save the climate, because we basically got one generation to save it. So I think that's part of that challenge. And I think it's really important that you do your work. And in this sense, speaking out and learn how to speak is important, because there's not just this time lag. But take Mr. Trump. I mean, Mr. Trump is consciously ignoring scientific facts when it comes to climate change. So you're not just fighting with a time lag, but you're also fighting with people that deny your findings. So we need to speak out, and we need to find ways to speak to society. We need to fight this post-factual times with facts, and that's very challenging in terms of communication.
So, thank you very much, David. I think we can open the floor for some questions from the audience. So if anybody is willing to make a comment or pose a question.
Transdisciplinarity. Come on, transdisciplinarity.
Don't be shy.
Thank you very much. It's an honor and a pleasure to belong to Politecnico when such top-tip discourses take place here. And so Patrizia was mentioning that I'm carrying out a research project on transdisciplinarity. So to what extent do you implement the connection with the civic society that Patrizia was highlighting as being the innovative factor in those new needs for educational path in your courses in this higher education? I think I would like to hear from Dr. Brusa. Thanks.
Yes. I don't know if you want to say something.
Yeah. Yes. So first of all, this is our goal to have a multidisciplinary approach even inside the doctoral school. In particular, for what concerns the educational path of which we are designing, actually we have disciplinary contents and let's say multidisciplinary contents. The idea is to have an introduction to this problem which is a little bit uncoupled from the doctoral program in which this is taught. Generally speaking, those courses were designed to be accessible for all the students. Obviously, the level is the doctoral level. That means that there is a component which is quite basic, but there is a second part in which, generally speaking, we try to implement several issues which are typical, for instance, to prepare a research project, to develop some research activities, and so on. But the idea was that all the engineers, all the architects, all the students at the level were able to come and to attend the classes, can understand, can implement, and can get a benefit from the tools which are also described and learned. From the point of view of the contents, there is also a disciplinary approach inside, because we need, in some cases, like in the case of the climate change, some contribution which is coming from experts of the technical domain. But the idea is to generalize the contents of the information in such a way that is accessible for all the PhD students. So this is a challenging the challenge, because the idea is to make a path which is accessible to all, which is sufficiently deep and consistent to give a clear overview of the content, but simultaneously sufficiently at high level, which might be masterized by all the attendees. And I think that in this case, the expertise of JRC, for instance, is very important, because they are used to educate people in this direction, because they perform a deeper research activity in this sense. And also the way to communicate, like David told you and told us, is a matter of the education path, which is proposed and provided to our PhD students. So there are many things, many issues which are interfaced and interconnected together.
Thank you.
Maybe just a small comment also from my side, because this is something that we foresee just to present in one of the courses, actually the one that will introduce the issue, because of course the JRC is working in a multidisciplinary manner, because every policy is actually having multiple implications, so it's very rare that we have domain experts alone working. But to move from multidisciplinary to transdisciplinary, there are two streams of activities, and they are both specifically related to sustainability. One is the so-called citizen science, so the fact of engaging more and more people, not only being subject of what is happening from policy, but also being those providing data and information and a real engagement. And the other aspect is that more and more there is an interest, and there is also a big group working on that at the JRC, on behavioral economics. So the fact of saying more and more it's clear that policies that are addressing specific stakeholders, like, I don't know, industries or like farmers, are not enough, because the choice that then is made at the level of consumer or at the level of certain economic players that are not very often the object of policies. For example, in the food system, the role that retailers have in the overall market, so we have millions of farmers in Europe, we have a lot of industries that are doing food manufacturing, and we have millions of people that are the consumers. But the retailers, the big players that actually are in between the consumer and farmers and producers, are those that are in the sustainability of the food system, are playing a big role. And from the policy point of view, they will never be really engaged in any action. So, and this is really part of this behavioral economics, so focusing on citizen and behavior of people and the choice that they could make, but also in better understanding who are the key players for these challenges. Because sometimes we give responsibility to certain actors, and maybe they are not the actors that really trigger a possible shift. Then a small comments on what David said on the fact of reducing the gap between an early sign and an action. Actually, if some of you is interested in that, there is a report of the European Environmental Agency, which is really called like this, so early warning and late action. And if we want to read through the history why that happened, is basically because there were a separation of sectors. So few environmental scientists pointing the finger, and a system of industries and society reluctant to change. So the issue of instructing people that are on the other side of the fence, so not the super environmental scientists, but those that can define solution on understanding these early signs, it's for me the key, and it's essential.
Thank you.
Other questions from the audience, please?
No.
Nobody's willing to ask or comment on what we are saying here? Okay, so maybe we can do a second tour of the table. We have 10 minutes, or maybe Patrizia can provide some conclusion for this panel. Summarize the key points and provide guidelines
It's hard
for the future.
to summarize, just like that we have been able to provide a little bit of curiosity and also maybe interest in continuing your education in the field that can involve a different aspect of well, different discipline and different aspect. Really difficult to conclude, but I'm quite, well, I believe that this first start at the PhD level with a package of courses can provide at the PhD where you know, PhD level is very usually vertical in terms of education because you have to go inside the discipline and go inside and inside. I remember when I did in Manchester, my PhD, they were very scared because I took a completely different view, and my PhD was about sustainable development evaluation in the built environment. That was about everything, starting from a philosophy that was multi-modal and multi-aspectual. So was very scared. My supervisor, every time that was meeting me, used to have a high temperature and a problem, but at the end, in 5 years, part-time PhD, I've been able to deliver with a complex philosophy behind. I'm saying this because usually PhD are really vertical and specific domain, and it's not easy to jump and to contaminate among different disciplines. The fact that this package of courses have got vertical hard content, but also been able to provide the appropriate knowledge for achieving and understanding the challenge of the society challenge that is behind a sustainable development goal is really important. And in my perspective, I believe that starting from this hard group of courses, we can enlarge and being able to next year maybe increase also additional educational courses. Well, I really hope that you, those students that are at the master level, will be able to join the PhD, and the few PhD will provide that. I'm sure that will be the winning to continue in this perspective. I really thanks Joint Research Center, because without their contribution would have been impossible to provide this. And thanks also to Ettore Bompard that has got a long-term collaboration with the Joint Research Center since years ago in the field of energy transition and security in particular. We have been able to enlarge this. I would like to thank Eugenio Brusa for being so optimistic and building the framework for including these courses inside the well-established PhD courses that we have, and David for this keynote that providing also the knowledge of European technical and scientist university that inspired us with all these important concepts. Thank you for attending this event. I'm sorry that you lost a number of other important parallel session and event that are around, but you still have time, and so don't miss the next. Thank you very much.